Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central. Alongside Jeff McLane, I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from Raymond James Stadium, getting set for the Eagles' Week 4 matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm great. Feels a little bit like deja vu all over again, being here. Raymond James Stadium again for the Eagles Bucs. Looking forward to it, though. I think this is an intriguing matchup beyond just the fact that the Eagles haven't won here in 3 of the last 4 times that they've been in Tampa. But both teams are unbeaten, kind of living on a prayer these first 3 weeks. Let's see who's the better team today.
All right, everyone. Just before we get into our conversation, just a reminder, we want you to be a part of it. If you can head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. You can leave us a question, a comment, whatever's on your mind. We'll answer some of those questions during our show today. And if you're watching over on YouTube, X, Facebook, whatever it may be, leave us a question down there, and we, again, will answer some of your questions throughout our show today. All right, Jeff, let us get into it. As we all know, the Eagles are coming into a pretty, not only a hostile environment, but an environment that they've really recently struggled with under Nick Sirianni. The Eagles are 1-3 in Tampa under Sirianni. However, if you think back to some of those games, especially last year, there was a lot of interesting circumstances for the Eagles in those games. In the Week 4 matchup against the Bucs last season, A.J. Brown was inactive, so was Devontae Smith, Lane Johnson. Even going back to that wild card loss in 2023, A.J. Brown didn't play in that game either. So there's a lot of different for sure, absolutely. However, Jeff, do you feel like there is also something bigger here with the Buccaneers having the Eagles' number in these last several years down here in Tampa?
Absolutely. Beyond just the weather, you're looking at some of the same pieces. So you have Jalen Hurts at quarterback. You have Nick Sirianni as the head coach. You have, on the other side of the ball, Todd Bowles. I know he wasn't the head coach for the first game. He was defensive coordinator during the Nick Sirianni era. And he's been the head coach since then. And I think, there's something to be said for Bowles versus Hurts. And, his blitzes and the way he defends the quarterback has given him some issues. I will point out that, as you mentioned, A.J. Brown has only played in one of those games since 2022. And in that game, the Eagles won. So he's just one guy, but I think that factors into it as well. Last year, there was more than just A.J. Brown out. Devontae Smith didn't play. Lane Johnson didn't play. We all know when Lane Johnson isn't in there, the Eagles' record versus when he is in there, and it's not good. Lane got hurt early last week, and that forced the Eagles to make some adjustments on the offensive line. In fact, they made 2. Matt Pryor was originally his replacement, and then they had to go to Fred Johnson early in the second half, and that kind of turned things around. But Lane is fine. He suffered a stinger on a tush push. But has practiced all week, so he's ready to go. And I think that could tilt the scales in favor of the Eagles here today. And as far as the Bucs, if I'm going to transition here a little bit, I feel like Olivia's parted us briefly. Baker Mayfield's kind of been one of these quarterbacks that has found a new home and really kind of run with it. And Vic Fangio, in fact, said this past week he couldn't understand some of the GMs that did let him go because he's really kind of become one of the better quarterbacks, the guy that you thought he would be, having been a number 1 overall pick. And he just kind of gets it done. He's got, what is it? I think it's 12 scrambles for 118 yards, something like that, through the first 3 weeks of the season. Maybe not getting as much done with the arm. The Bucs will be without Mike Evans today, and we'll get into that a little bit because the Eagles have just announced that Adoree Jackson, who has a groin injury, won't be active. So that means we'll see Keely Ringo starting for the first time today this season. No Mike Evans, but they have Chris Godwin they're getting back, and he's certainly one of the better slot receivers in the NFL. They also have a really good rookie in Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. He's really kind of come on. In fact, I think if they had offensive rookie of the year voting right now, it probably would be Buka. So I guess, if we're going to switch to the Eagles offense here a little bit, I think a lot of the talk has been about having an aggressive mindset. And A.J. Brown talked about it after the game. So did Jalen Hurts. And, we didn't see it until the second half of the Rams game. Did we see them kind of just, I wouldn't say throwing caution to the wind, but you saw them move to tempo, which I think helped out Hurts. In fact, it wasn't like as much of the game plan that you're running. You're essentially, what you're doing is when you go tempo, you're going to your base plays. And that, you're a little more comfortable. I think Jalen Hurts was a little more comfortable with that, knowing where his receivers would be and just kind of let it rip. Whereas in the first half, there was hesitancy at times. It wasn't all on him, obviously. As we talked about, the Lane Johnson exit affected them. They couldn't get much going on the ground. So, what's the game plan going to be this week? Are they going to come out firing? Are they going to, maybe get away from this idea of establishing Saquon Barkley on the ground, because defenses have really taken that away from him these first 3 weeks, and they're living in a new world, and they have to kind of get used to that new world. And it's gonna require Hurts to, in this game especially, handle the blitz more. He's been blitzed at a high rate these first 3 weeks. He's always been blitzed a lot by Bowles. In fact, I think it's like almost double the amount that he normally is, and that has been a real struggle for him. The Eagles have to do a better job of giving him built-in answers versus the blitz, but he also has to do a better job of, signaling, checking the plays to help his receivers on hot routes. That's going to be a key, I think, in this game. As for Barkley, what is he? He's only averaging 3.3 yards per carry, and this season, which I see here it's tied for the second worst single season rate of his career. So, look, they're not going to all of a sudden just abandon Saquon Barkley. I mean, there have been times where you see him get into the second level, maybe being able to break one, and that's kind of what's been missing from the run offense these first 3 weeks, is just those big plays, those big explosive runs from Saquon Barkley that they got so many of last year. Bowles has always hung his defense. Obviously there's the blitzing, but in terms of stopping the run, I mean, he doesn't shy away from stacking the box when necessary, having an extra safety down there in the box to help with the run. Now, it's a lot easier when you have Vita Vea up front in the middle of that defensive line. He clogs a lot of gaps, and that allows the other guys to be free. And that's been an issue, for the Eagles against the Bucs, is getting it going on the ground. Olivia, thanks for rejoining us. Yeah, I did mention that Adoree Jackson is out, and Kelee Ringo is in. We'll see how that plays out. Olivia, what do you think is going to happen in terms of whether they're going to have Quinyon Mitchell follow one of the other receivers? Certainly not Godwin in the slot, but there's a chance he could be following Ibuka.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how they choose to deploy the cornerback, specifically with Quinyon Mitchell and that potential matchup there. He had a lot of success going up last week against Davante Adams in that game against the Los Angeles Rams. Was able to hold him to just a couple of catches. He did have that one defensive pass interference call on him. But overall, when I spoke to him in the locker room this week about his performance in that game, and he felt really good about it. He said it was a big confidence builder for him. So that can only mean good things going forward for Quinyon Mitchell. So we'll see if that's something that they opt to do in this game. Might be a good idea to have Mitchell follow their best receiver who lines up primarily not in the slot like Chris Godwin would, simply because they'll be able to kind of let him handle Ibuka and then allow Kelee Ringo to potentially get some help over top on his side as well. So we'll see what Big Fangio ends up doing, but this is a big game for Kelee Ringo. This is a guy who lost the starting outside cornerback job in camp to Adoree Jackson, and then the Eagles acquired Jacorian Bennett during training camp from the Las Vegas Raiders, and he steps in and he takes that backup role. So Kelee Ringo has been the third string guy now with Jacorian Bennett on injured reserve due to a pec injury. Adoree Jackson has been ruled out of this game, as you mentioned, Jeff, guy. So if he has a good performance in this game, I would say he has a shot at securing that role going forward. I don't think Adoree Jackson, he has been better since that week 1 game against the Dallas Cowboys. However, he has been very injury prone, hasn't finished many of these games this season. It'll be interesting to see how Keely Ringo fares in this game. So it is not only Adoree Jackson who is not playing today. We're also not going to see Nolan Smith out there on the field, as he is now on injured reserve with a triceps injury, Jeff. That's a pretty big loss for an Eagles edge rusher core that is already kind of not, I wouldn't say struggling right now, but the group as a whole, the defensive front as a whole, has not generated a ton of pressure through the first 3 weeks of the season. Eagles defense has a 31.8% pressure rate, which ranks 22nd in the NFL right now. So with Smith out, the Eagles are going to be relying on pretty much some of these depth guys to step up and fill these snaps by committee. We will not see Azeez Ojulari out there on the field today. He is inactive. But we will see perhaps someone like Obo Okoronkwo, who will make his debut for the Eagles. He has not been active yet through the first 3 weeks of the season. Patrick Johnson is also active for the game. So behind Jalix Hunt, for example, there's Zadarius Smith, Josh Uche. So they've got some options there to step into Smith's role. What do you think about this edge rushers core? Where do you think the weaknesses might be on this Bucs offensive line, where they could potentially exploit and get home to Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, well, coming into the season, I thought edge rusher was the biggest issue, just in terms of, okay, you're asking two young guys who showed promise last year in Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith. Nolan in his second year, Jalix in his rookie season, but they hadn't really done it yet. It was kind of a little bit of a wishing and hoping that they would be able to step into those roles, and I think, as you mentioned, they've been fine. The sacks haven't been there. There have been pressures on occasion. It's not just them. Obviously, it's the middle of the line, and you're hoping that Jalen Carter eats up two blockers to set them free. But real quick, before I get to the matchup, is with Nolan Smith, I think this is something that you're worried about with him, because he's so small for an edge rusher, and he plays such a physical type of football, whether he can hold up. And now this is like the third or fourth injury that he's had to that shoulder, right shoulder arm area. He had a torn pec in college. Then he had a stinger in that area during the preseason of his rookie year, which the Eagles had said affected him to some extent, which he has said later on affected him to some extent in his rookie season. And then last year, of course, he had the triceps that he tore in the Super Bowl, had off-season surgery on that. That kind of slowed his return when he came back during training camp. And now here it is, not same injury, it's not torn, but it's aggravated. And they need to build the strength back up, from what I understand. And that's going to take some time. Could take him take it all the way into the bye in week 9, which means he isn't back until the Packers game in early November. So that's a potential long-term issue. Now, in terms of this game, you mentioned Zadarius Smith, Joshua Uche. They'll probably be the two primary guys that take Smith's snaps. Maybe you'll see a little more of Hunt, maybe a little more put on his plate. And this is the reason why they kind of went out and got Smith, a proven veteran who has done in the league before. Kind of flashed really early in that Chiefs game, not as much last week. Uche has had good rushes at times. He's probably played only about maybe 20% of the snaps. So, we'll see what he can do with a heavier load on his shoulders. If you're looking at the Bucs O-line, though, this is, they're getting Tristan Wirfs back at left tackle, and that's a huge upgrade for them. Clearly, all-pro caliber player. The issues have been on the other side. The right guard and the right tackle are both out. Now you have Charlie Heck there. I think that's a guy that the Eagles certainly can expose in the pass rush, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them throw various, simulated pressures at him.
It was interesting talking to Zadarius Smith this week. He, of course, as you mentioned, Jeff, was acquired during the season and was thrown right into the action week 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs. But you think back to that game, he only had to learn a small portion of the playbook. And he said just this week that he's got the nickel plays down. He's still trying to catch up and get up to speed on some of the base calls. So perhaps we don't see Zadarius Smith out there as because of more anyway than they that we will have to keep an eye on. I wanted to get to this question on Inquirer.com really quickly. Who participant in practice this week is good to go for today's game, of course. But do you think there's any concern there with Mayfield nursing something about how he gets through this? His capabilities are out there on the field when he is.
Yeah, I mean, it's his throwing arm, so there's certainly the risk of him not feeling as well throwing the ball. Obviously, it could be aggravated again if the Eagles direct some of their hits towards his right bicep. Everyone's talking about his legs, but Baker's a pretty accurate quarterback and has been for a long time, and I think that's where he gets you. Gets the ball into the receiver's hands, and they can make guys miss in space. Last season in the loss here, those first two drives, the Eagles did not tackle well, and that put them in a hole. It wasn't just the offense that didn't perform that day; the defense didn't either, and that's why we saw when the Eagles came out of the bye, Cooper DeJean promoted to the slot, and then we saw some personnel change in terms of how much Jordan Davis was playing. And then Jalen Carter obviously getting more put on his plate, and more Ajomo and Milton Williams, who's no longer here. So it was a big week for the Eagles, a big loss for them. Not good, but in terms of forcing them to make some necessary changes, it did that. But Baker is still dangerous, even without Mike Evans, and it'll be interesting to see how Vic comes out and tries to defend him.
Absolutely. All right, Jeff, we have discussed quite a few players. I should say you have discussed quite a few players on today's show so far. A lot of interesting storylines going into today's game. However, if you had to pick just one player that you're most intrigued to.
Yeah, so I'm going to continue with the thought of the edge rusher and just go back to Alex Hunt, who, again, he's been close. You've seen it at times, like just kind of like just a tick off in terms of getting to the quarterback. But, close hasn't been good enough, and you have to deliver at times. And I feel like Alex Hunt is as much promise that he's shown. It's time for him to start delivering. It's time for him to start producing. This will be an opportunity with Nolan out for the Eagles to use him a little more and maybe flip sides. We'll see how he does if he's matched up against worse. That's pretty much as good as it gets in the NFL. And he usually shuts down guys. We'll see if Jelix can get something going there. If they have to move him to the other side against Charlie Heck, possibly he can get home. So Jelix year 2, it's time to step up, and this would be a great opportunity for him to do that.
They need him to. He has been put in simply not these really big roles. Whether or not he is ready for that, I think, has been a big question. He's coming up. You're right, Jeff. He had a season, but it is time for him to show what he's got. So I'm going to keep along this theme on the defensive line. Really big performance last was Rainer also had a big chase down.
All right. Well, we lost Olivia briefly. She's going to talk about Jordan Davis, who I did mention, just earlier about how last year it was this game that kind of made the Eagles look at their personnel up front and the way that he was performing and assess that he's playing too much and certainly on pass downs. He just, he didn't have the conditioning. He was wearing down late in games, and that was, problem for a guy that you had invested so much in, trading up to draft him at number 14 in the 2021 draft. And it kind of set in motion this whole new Jordan Davis that really looked at himself literally and figuratively. And, decided that he's got to do better in terms of getting conditioned, and that meant changing his diet. That meant working out more, and it was a long process. They didn't really increase his playing time late last year, but you kind of started to see the fruits of his labor in the playoffs. He made some big plays, and then that continued in this offseason. And these first 3 games, he's been one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. Now, again, the sacks haven't quite been there, but he's making plays against the run. It's typical for him. I think he's got like 16 tackles, which is really a high number for someone who plays that position. And then last week was the Jordan Davis game, his breakout game, I guess we'll call it. He had his first sack of the season when he ran Matthew Stafford out of bounds, and then of course the big play coming off of Jalen Carter's block on the drive earlier to win the Eagles the game, scoop and score, walk-off fashion. But he's going to have to, continue it here. I mean, it's just, it doesn't let up. The Bucs are going to try and run the ball. Bucky Irvin hasn't been that productive. I think he's only averaging 3.1 yards per carry. Olivia's back here. Olivia, I stole your guy. I talking about Jordan Davis, but if you want to jump in and finish, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it right on the head, Jeff. He's going to be a really important player in this game. He's just been an important player for this Eagles defense. He's really stepped up over the first few weeks of the season, and it's going to be a matter of can he continue to be consistent. He's been remarkably consistent through these first 3 weeks. Can he continue that success in today's game? That's the big question. I think he's going to, as you mentioned already, he's going to play a big role in that run defense and attempting to slow down Bucky Irving, who hasn't had a lot of success this season, but last year he's coming off of a very good year. So he is the player that I have circled on the roster in today's game. All right, Jeff, time to bring out the crystal ball. I was wrong last week. I picked an Eagles loss. Of course, I was one Jordan Davis field goal block away from that being the case. However, who do you have in today's game?
Yeah, I'm sticking with the Eagles again, which is probably bad news for Eagles fans. But I did get last week right. So, look, this game, it could certainly go either direction, and the Eagles' record here doesn't inspire much confidence in them coming down here and winning. That being said, I could give you the quick answer, which would be A.J. Brown is playing. But I think there's more to it than that. Look, I mean, he only had 6 catches in the first 2 games for like 50-something yards, and it really took until the second half. 6 catches, 109 yards, and a touchdown for the Eagles to really show us the A.J. Brown that we've become accustomed to. So, they're going to try and get him started early, I imagine. But and then you look at their secondary. There's obviously still a lot of talent there. Anto Winfield is one of the best safeties in the NFL. I don't know who's going to be matched up against him. If it's Jamel Dean, Zion McCollum at the outside cornerback, they may just keep those guys on their sides. But you have to worry about Devontae Smith. You have to worry about Dallas Goedert, and I feel this whole kind of mindset of being aggressive, maybe throwing in some tempo in there. I think the Eagles can carry that over. Not 100% confident still in Kevin Patullo. I still need to see more out of him in terms of the play calling. I need to see some more imagination and setting plays up. So I'm not going all in on him yet, but I feel like this is a game that they can win. They can grind out a victory, and I think it's gonna be a close one. And I have the Eagles winning by a field goal, 27-24, and moving to 4-0.
Well, Jeff, I learned my lesson last week. Picking against the Eagles right now is not a very smart idea. This is a 2022 in this game for a lot of the same reasons that you already mentioned. This is a team that is going into this game mostly healthy. And more importantly, Jalen Hurts is going into this game with all of his top receivers on offense and top weapons and Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley. It's just a matter of can they sustain the success that they had in the second half against the Rams. I don't think the Eagles are all of a sudden magically cured on offense. That's not how this works. About the passing game and about the run game and things that they
Well, it seems like Olivia is having some connection issues again. Thank you, Raymond James Wi-Fi. Yeah, Olivia has the Eagles winning 28-22. Interesting score by 6. And I guess moving to 4-0. But we're going to wrap things up here. Everybody, thank you for joining us at Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, and for spending part of your pregame with us. We'll be live in the comment section of inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day throughout the day. So head on over and join our conversation. We'll be reacting, answering your questions, and keeping the coverage going there. And if you want more Eagles Insight, please check out my podcast, Uncovering the Birds, where I take you behind the scenes each week with exclusive reporting, interviews, and everything you might have missed about your favorite team. We've just added another feature, another podcast, a day after reaction, where one of my Inquirer colleagues joins me. That's been fun to do, and it seems like people are excited of hearing that type of reaction and insight and analysis the day after games. So you can listen to Uncovering the Birds at inquirer.com/podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast. So everyone, please enjoy the Eagles, Bucs, and as always, stay tuned to the Inquirer for all your latest on the Eagles all season long. Thank you.